video up top, and that should take care of it.
Yeah, but it's not showing up on my phone. So
I can probably stop it for you. Let's see if it works.
yeah, okay. Well, I don't mind as long as you guys don't mind.
Oh, well, it's up now. So,
Well, you have to click on the stop video up top, and that should take care of it.
Yeah, but it's not showing up on my.
the recording is running.
We have everybody here, Wendling, you know.
Yeah, so we have you, Rod, Chris, Jeff, Christine, and Ryan, and Lisa, Ben, and Adam.
So we've got a quorum.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and even if we didn't have a quorum, we could still discuss, just because there's no action on the item tonight. I mean, obviously there would be action on the minutes, but for the other item on the agenda, even if we didn't have a quorum, we'd be okay, but it looks like we do.
All right, let's go ahead. Should we get started then?
Sure.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
We'll welcome everybody out to Planning Commission meeting tonight. It is being done electronically because of the COVID-19 guidelines. Item number 1 on the agenda for the Roderick Catalyst subdivision phase has been pulled at the request of the developer. So we'll go right straight down to item number 2. It's a discussion item only. There will be no motion taken, no action taken. Adam, would you start us out in the discussion? On everybody that's here, please put your 2 cents worth in. Let's get a good conversation going.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple weeks ago, we introduced this and had a little bit of a discussion on it. I took notes and tried to make some changes, some additions to the CC1 zone as it stands, given some of the things that we had discussed last time. One of the things I wanted to get your input in, or your input on, is basically the permitted uses. So in section 2 of the ordinance, it goes through a list of permitted uses. I intentionally did not cross many of them out because I wanted to kind of see where you felt we should go on those. I did cross out a few that I just felt probably weren't in harmony with what we were trying to do in that zone, or what we were trying to do in our downtown area. But I'd like you to take a look at that, give me your input on that. We can discuss it tonight. Another thing I did, in section 4 of the code of the CC1 zone, it talks about special provisions. And number 5 of that special provision, I added to that some language to basically ensure that buildings in that zone are pushed up to street fronts to the maximum extent possible, similar to what we've done in the TOD to kind of create that walkable environment. And then also, just so you don't have blank walls with no windows or anything, I put in some language for being able to have some visibility through into the buildings to enhance that pedestrian atmosphere. Also on number 4 in that section, what I did was added a sentence for parking areas. So you don't, basically what we're trying to avoid is large or parking areas that are in front of buildings in that downtown zone. So we could have parking interior to the buildings, and then that would help push those buildings out towards the street frontages. So again, I made some changes as to what we've discussed, but I really wanted to open it up to you. And if you have ideas tonight, let's discuss those. I can incorporate those into a future draft, or even in the interim, if you think of something after tonight, please call or email, and then we'll move forward and see where we go. But this was a start, and we'll just open it up.
Adam, I have one comment on section 2, number 10.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It allows automobile dealerships on the main drag, so to speak. How
Yes.
can we avoid getting these little mom and pop places that pop up and, they take over an old house and tear out the grass and put, say, asphalt down for 6 or 8 cars?
So
Is
there's
there
two
any-
ways there's 2 ways I think we can address that. One is you could either take it out of the CC1 zone altogether. That's probably the easiest. Or two, you could put a minimum size requirement for that type of use. Given that we allow those in every other commercial zone, it might be worth considering taking that out of our downtown zone. If that's something that you feel can be in other areas and not necessarily downtown, we can do that.
Well, I think we ought to get rid of it downtown because, you got your big dealerships like Doug Smith and the Chevrolet and Ford dealership down on Fifth East, that they take in acres and acres. They've got hundreds of cars out there. And it seems like lately, well, not real lately, but we've had over the years, a lot of small mom and pop things that want to come to town and just, take over an old house and put 6 or 8 cars, old used cars around it and make it a used car parking lot. I think that kind of deteriorates from our downtown, what we're trying to accomplish. Because we have got the bigger, dealerships on the edge of town, and that's great. They're great to have them, want them there, but I just get kind of tired of all these little 5 and 10 car parking lots downtown that trying to sell, everything from pine nuts to old trucks.
Yeah, again, I mean, that's something I saw that when I was going through and making the initial changes, but I wanted to kind of see where you and the rest of the commissioners felt on that.
What do the rest of you think about that?
I agree.
Yeah, if we're gonna try to make this more pedestrian friendly and encourage, that more walkable nature, an auto dealership, new or used, I think is really conducive to that.
Okay.
Sort of ironic.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's funny. Same thing with number 9. I don't know if that fits in my mind. What do you guys think?
That was one that I had a question in my mind, but I purposely didn't touch it yet because I wanted to see if anyone else looked at that and had any feelings on that one. What I should have done is highlighted the ones I had questions in blue, now that I'm looking at it, but that was one that I would have highlighted in blue.
Well, I see where you already say that you can't have outside storage, but I think Christine's got a good idea. That's if we're trying to keep everything user friendly downtown, we want to have businesses that people can walk to and from without going around things.
So
I
Adam,
guess, Christine,
Yeah.
are you suggesting that the hardware, lumber, plumbing type stores are eliminated from the zone?
they don't seem to fit like a thriving downtown that invites lots of walking, and
Not right on Main Street.
it doesn't seem to be a fit for me.
So just a example or some experience that I had, I spent some time in Chicago, and, I think we're trying to promote some residential living in that area, right? And so, I mean, there's times where walking and needing some type of a hardware, lumber, or, something of that nature comes up. And there may be a need for something like that. I mean, as simple as like
Good
light
point.
bulbs or, screws or a hammer or something like that. I think it's important that the outside storage is not there, but allowing, that type of business, I think, is important.
That's a good
I can
point.
give you an example of a business right now that's a plumbing business downtown. It's Burt's Waterworks. It's on Center Street, just
Yeah.
south of Main. And that's an example of one that's there today, and it doesn't seem to be too out of character.
Right. So I guess I'm thinking more like, Home Depot or something with a big parking lot and all of that kind of thing. So, and that wouldn't be something that would be in this zone just because of the parking. So I guess, if parking is behind and, it's a use that people in the area would need or would appreciate, I can see that working. And I think it's kind of self-limiting as far as size. You're not going to have like washing machines and huge amounts of lumber and stuff like that, just because that would require probably more parking. So
Yeah.
I see your point, Rod.
Yeah, I like, and I've been to a couple like Ace Hardware's in these like rural towns, and
Yeah.
they have a lot of the hardware, the plumbing, some of the heating equipment. So like they're not big on the lumber, but it is a place where you can get, your supplies you need for your home. And I think the lumber side, when I see lumber, I'm thinking more of like the Home Depot, the lumber yards. That requires a space to outdoor or outside storage. But as a general category, I like what you're saying, Rod.
Could you show us just on the map how far? I can't remember if this goes all the way down to like the auto dealerships or if it stops.
Oh, the CC1, no, it doesn't go all the way west.
Okay.
Doesn't it stop around 200 West?
200 or 300, and then there's the CC2 zone, which is kind of that intended to kind of keep that historic Main Street residential feel, although those can convert to commercial uses, which a number of them have. And then beyond that is the larger shopping center zones, planned commercial and all of that. But yeah, we'll pull up a map.
So while you're doing that, one of the ones that I was looking at as well was hospitals.
Yeah, that one, I don't know where, I mean, we have hospital in the public, or not public facilities, in the professional office. So that's probably one that's safe to cross off.
Because I'm looking and I'm looking at how we're developing. I mean, and this is talking about a hospital like I'm envisioning American Fork Hospital. That complex it's at the east end of the city. And we were already kind of planning things around that area as that area continues to change. So I think that maybe now, if someone wants to do like an urgent care or something like that, I think that's allowable because
and that would fall under just other medical clinics. That's what we would consider that. And we do there are a few, I guess what you could call medical clinics in the CC1 zone now. But you're right, like a hospital use, that is, we have that over on the east side with the American Fork Hospital, and that's more suited for that professional office zone. Because they typically require large parcels, larger acreage, and quite extensive parking, which you don't find in the downtown area.
Yeah, in fact, I would say that complex is, the hospital complex is almost as big as this CC1 zone as it is.
Yeah,
so
it probably is.
Well, most hospitals don't want to get right downtown. They want to be on the fringe of the city where it's easy access to and from also.
Correct.
I know they've even said that where the hospital is now, if they were going to build one in American Fork now, they wouldn't build it there because it's getting too encroached by residential. It's hard to get in and out with the ambulance and the emergency equipment and so forth. So having one right downtown is probably not going to happen regardless.
A question that I have that Vendelin actually brought up, and we were discussing it a little earlier, is when it comes to fast food and drive-throughs, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any, or do you lean one way or the other? We had kind of discussed a little and thought we should bring it up with you.
So I guess I'm a little, I'm not quite sure where to take this because I have certain ideas of what a main street should look like and what kinds of things should be there. And so I almost want to make special rules for that, like maybe not a drive-through on Main Street, but the CC1 zone is really quite big. And I almost feel like we need different rules for the Main Street and then the CC1. So, the CC1 could easily have hardware stores and things like that. What I had in my mind was that we were making rules for just that Main Street and the adjacent streets.
Yeah, what would,
so like it would be a lot more restrictive there, I would.
Yeah, and because the CC1 is that core, that's really what we were looking at. And while Main Street does go through there, there's a couple north and south streets. Again, one of the driving forces behind this was to open it up for residential, which we've tried to do. Basically, the limiting factor on density is the parking. And so where we've identified that, we've also put in that the parking kind of is that self-limiting factor. But I see what you're saying. I think, and I can look at this and see what we might be able to add with that too. And then if you have any ideas, Christine or anyone, you can always reach out and let me know too.
Yeah,
So
I have-
I'm okay with it, with removing the food drive-ins.
Especially at least right along Main Street, like Christine was saying.
Right,
And
on Main
even going a block off either
Okay.
side as well. I'm okay with that, because if we're trying to make it walkable, there's got to be, we've got to have a few additional restrictions.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you can't go there at, if you're having takeout, you can stop and pick it up and go.
Yeah, takeout is fine, I think.
But usually drive-ins require additional space in order to create that circular motion,
Mhm.
and that can create additional conflicts if we're trying to make it pedestrian friendly.
I
If you
agree.
think about In-N-Out Burger right now, or Chick-fil-A, very successful businesses with drive-throughs. They're probably the antithesis of walkable, because there is so much traffic in and around the building.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, drive-throughs are taking on a whole new meaning since the pandemic hit too. A lot of places didn't want drive-throughs, but now I think everybody wants one, because like Chick-fil-A, McDonald's are all doing double drive-throughs and trying to get as many cars through as they can. So drive-throughs are become very, very popular just because of the circumstance we're in right now.
Yeah, and just as a tiny preview of what's to come in the future, we're going to see a reconfiguration of the In-N-Out site. So speaking of drive-through.
Also, Adam, on line 4,
Uh-huh.
where we have office buildings, we have hospital in there, so it's kind of duplicated.
Oh yeah, where was the other one you found it? Because that's the one I was crossing
13.
off.
13.
Yeah,
Oh,
2 and-
yes,
2
you're
and
right.
13.
You've got it referred to twice.
Yeah, okay. I had seen it under 4, but not 13, so that's good. I'm making note of that right now.
So how do we say that funeral homes, or some of these things could be in CC1, but we really don't want them on the main street, where we want to have it very interesting for a pedestrian?
You could always throw a caveat on any street. I mean, you could always just throw the caveat in there, not on Main Street, but I think by default, some of those would probably not locate there anyway, just because they're going to,
Need more parking.
just by their nature, they're going to either need more parking or, yeah. I'm
Well, I
trying
have
to,
to agree. I have to agree with Christine. I think we need to have maybe a little something different for actual Main Street. But Christine, how far north and south of Main Street do you think that restriction should apply?
North and south, yeah. That's a good
How-
question.
How far off
Well-
of Main Street do you want to go with that restriction if you put a restriction in place?
the
You have
CC1
a
zone
funeral
as it
home on
is,
100, don't you?
the CC1 zone as it is only goes a block north and almost a block south. So if you're looking at that, you could say something like not fronting Main Street for a
That's a
use. If you don't
possibility.
want a use on Main Street, it could be called out in the zone, but you could have the exception, not fronting Main Street, or I could play with that wording a little bit.
That's a good idea. I like that.
So, and this, at first when I looked at this, it looked bigger than it is. It is only a block north, but it goes over past east of Fresh Market. So that area kind of goes a long distance. But, maybe in that small of a space, we don't need a funeral home. Maybe we can just say on some of these things, like an automobile sales place. Maybe we just don't need it in that spot.
Well, you already have a funeral home on 100 North.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Yeah,
so this brings
that's
me
where
to a
Anderson's
question.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
This
one
brings
block
me-
north.
Does what we're writing today define what is currently allowed or what will be allowed to be created in the future? Because are some of these uses grandfathered in, or if they're grandfathered in, does it have to be allowed on this new thing that we're writing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so if we take a use out and there's one there that's grandfathered in, they will be allowed to continue unless I believe if the use is discontinued, I believe it's for 1 year, then it can't go back. But if they sell it and it's another user of the same type, just a different company, then that could still be allowed to continue.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's the change of use that really, or ceasing of use that
Yeah,
eliminates the grandfathering.
Okay, so just because there's a funeral home in the zone right now, we don't have to include it in the new document, right?
yeah, no, I mean, if that, let's say in theory, that was something you wanted to remove, it could be removed from the zone, but it does not affect the current
Okay.
use unless they were to vacate and cease to exist for, I believe it's 1 year.
And they've been there for what, over 100 years already, so I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah, I think they're pretty stable, but yeah.
Most funeral homes, once they establish in town, they usually don't move around much.
Neither do their clients.
Well,
So-
Yeah,
So on number 12 then, with funeral homes, being that we already have one, do we want to leave that in, or do we want to say, like, we really don't need another funeral home in this area? Or do we just let the parking be the limitation for that?
I think
I mean,
you can control that with the parking, can't you?
in
What was
our, I believe we have a requirement in our parking code for those types of uses, so if it can't be parked, then, you know, that's a limiting factor as well.
anything else from some of you folks we haven't heard from? Anybody got anything else now?
Well, I had, I guess, a couple things. Maybe it's just more clarifying. I know that, I guess I'm not sure the language was strong enough to clearly state that the residential use is more at the second level of the building and not at the ground level, and not
Okay.
allowing any type of a loophole that that the main level of the building is definitely commercial, and that's the only use. So,
And I think we want that on Main Street itself, but I think some of the interior and side roads or interior to the block, I don't know that I have a strong opinion that residential couldn't be on that ground level. But definitely along Main Street, I think it shouldn't be. So I think we should clarify that and make that strong.
okay,
So
yeah,
did we say, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I can see that definitely on Main Street, that the main level should be commercial based.
And maybe, you know, what do we say, like a half a block into the adjacent, or like, you know what I mean? Like as soon as we get to the adjacent streets, is residential okay on the main level?
How do you feel? Do you feel that it could be on those side streets, or do you feel that there should be some limitation on the side streets? Maybe make it or allow it, but only a certain percentage.
Yeah, maybe a percentage, because I don't want commercial to just drop off immediately as soon as we get off of Main Street.
Yeah, I think the percentage is a good idea.
So
What's
for
the-
instance, in our, in the TOD zone, anything off of 200 South, I believe the requirement is, I believe it's 25% commercial on the main level.
Yeah.
We can put some kind of requirement like that, or you can go up to 50. It's up to you, but definitely along Main Street, we can make that so it's, you know, residential on the main level is not allowed on Main Street.
And then if we made some other, I mean, I wouldn't want to say that all of the CC1 has to be 25% commercial on the main level, you know, because it is kind of a larger area.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, you know, and you could, I know in some areas like Provo, they have in some of their interior blocks, they actually have residential structures like apartment buildings. And those are just strictly residential from the first floor on. And there's no requirement for anything other than residential, but again, they're in the center of the block, so they don't necessarily front onto Center Street or University. They're kind of tucked behind that first level of building. And so I think if we had something like that, I don't see that restriction being in place for some kind of interior of block residential structures.
But using that as an example, Adam, there are places where you have 2 to sometimes 3 floors of commercial, and then you have your residential on top of that.
Yeah,
and that was one that when I went through here, I'm like, are we limiting the commercial to just be right there on the first floor, or could it go onto a second floor? Or
I think it could. It definitely could. I don't think you want to. In my own mind, I don't think you'd want to try to force it on any other floors than at least the first floor. I think that would be a hard sell.
But I want to leave that option open though.
Yes.
So that they.
Yeah,
they
the commercial
choose to,
may
they
extend beyond the first floor.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it's not required, floors 1 through 2 or 3,
Yeah,
but.
Right. I don't
Yeah.
want to put a
Mhm.
requirement, but at the same time, I don't want to prohibit, should there be a mixture of commercial on the main level with maybe some office on the second or third or whatever.
Yeah, they can definitely do that.
Okay. Okay.
And we can make sure of that.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, number 7 says parking lots. Does that just mean possible to have a parking lot behind it?
Yeah, so what I've
Yeah.
done on the special provision number 4 in the code, under special provisions number 4, I've said that parking areas shall be located toward the interior of properties. And one thing we can add is, Vendeline and I were talking, we could potentially add more language to that, something to the effect of parking areas shall not front public streets and must be
Yes.
located in the
Yeah.
interior of a project. So we can tighten that up a little.
I did think that needed to be stronger.
I feel like,
So we can,
I mean, you said interior, but are you just trying to get it off of the main street, but maybe focus more on, hey, the parking is in the rear of the property?
Right.
yeah, the rear or the interior, because in these blocks, sometimes the interior of the block could actually be used for parking when you have the buildings around the outside.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so one of the ways to help with that is when we basically put in number 5 under special provisions, the buildings will have a maximum setback of 10 feet. So that would allow them some space to work with their facade, and maybe they want something out front. But what that does is that will prohibit parking in the front of buildings like you'd see at a strip mall.
Yeah.
Right.
So Adam, with the special provision 5, which I like, having that frontage and the open window requirements, I'm wondering if this is to be catered to more of a commercial building and on Main Street. This is where this would apply. So if we get off of Main Street and we get up into the mid block and it's now more of a lower level residential, I mean, do we really want this type of a window treatment requirement in those areas? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm looking at that and going through my mind what, if there's something we could add to that.
I don't think it would. I mean, thinking of, I'm looking over in my mind over by Fresh Market. There's like, the FedEx place and some restaurants, and a lot of those places choose to have open window views already. I'm trying to think of places that don't have. I mean, a lot of it is kind of a glass front. So maybe that's a good model. I see what you're saying, though. I'm just trying to think of a commercial use that wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
Theater,
Well,
maybe?
aren't you talking about residential uses more?
This
Yeah,
is
if you go
number.
back up
Oh,
mid-block and you have a residential on the main level, I mean, would you really want this much window treatment in
Oh,
that
for
scenario?
residential.
well, and it also says that faces a street or other public space. So if you have an interior one, it probably wouldn't be facing a street. At least in my own view. I could be wrong.
Rod, are you saying if these are residential, then you wouldn't want all that window?
Well, I can just see where someone, there's an existing building in mid-block off of Main Street, and they're trying to convert it and use it for residential. But now we have this restriction with all this window treatment, and they would have to change the existing building to comply with this. But maybe they're already grandfathered in. Maybe I'm overthinking this thing.
As they would be grandfathered in.
All buildings located adjacent to a street? Oh, like if they're on a street?
Right.
I purposely used adjacent because of what happened in the TOD and the play on words. So I'm using adjacent, or we could also use abutting.
You
Well,
mean when
adjacent
they were
means-
around the corner
Adjacent
from
means running
200?
parallel with it, right?
What was that?
Well, adjacent means running parallel, right? So I mean, you'd always have the building adjacent to the street in my mind.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
That
I
means
took,
both-
I didn't want to use the word fronting because that's easy to play around and say,
Oh.
well, I'm not fronting the street, so.
Is this like what we have off 200 South, where we wanted to make sure that if they turned the front of the building to an adjacent street rather than 200 South, that they would still have the same rules, right?
Yeah,
Is
so-
this what you're referring to?
Yeah, and in the TOD, the wording that we used was abutting. So, I mean, we can use that same wording here too, that's fine.
I think we ought to use the same word to be consistent between our ordinances.
And that's a good idea, John.
So then it would say all buildings abutting a street or a major street.
It says, let me find this.
I'm reading on number 5, number
Yeah.
4.5.
All buildings abutting a street. I took out major because that's really not a term that we have in our transportation stuff now. So all buildings adjacent to a street, because that just leaves it to all the streets. But I can put abutting. Adjacent was just the old language that's been there.
Mhm. But aren't all buildings abutting a street?
Oh, you got a lot of interior.
You could have interior buildings in the block, like behind
Okay.
another building, and it could be separated by a drive aisle or a parking lot, so then it would
Okay.
not be abutting the street.
Okay,
What this tries to do is just force that openness, if you will, along the streets. And so you don't have corridors with no windows or openings, basically creating a dead space.
mm-hmm.
All right, how are we doing? Anybody else got anything else that we need to bring forth on this one?
Just have one other question.
All
Yeah,
right, go ahead.
And maybe it's a different ordinance. I don't know, but we're going to put residential above commercial. It seems like some type of like a requirement of what's allowed on what residential is allowed to put on the outside. Meaning, I would hate to see like clotheslines start appearing on the second level or something of that nature. Is there some type of restrictions that should be put in place for the residential use as far as like outside treatments or anything like that? It's just a thought.
we can look at what we've got in other areas as far as so you have some sort of variety instead of just basically, I don't want to say blank walls because they're not necessarily blank walls, but they would be different treatments on the outside. So you do have some kind of mix of materials, if you will. We can definitely put that in.
What
I'm
do you
just gonna
put
make
there,
a
like a
note.
minimum number of products or what?
Yeah, like a minimum number of products, and you need to have at least X number. Typically, it's 3 or 4.
The planned community zone, for example, has language like that.
What's
Yeah, we
the,
can.
what's the minimum at the planned
I believe
community
it's
zone?
3.
And
Yeah.
some of those have looked too stark to us, so maybe we should say 4.
Yeah, and then some of them have also turned out differently than what we were shown. So.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But we'll just leave it at that.
should we say 4? Because I'm looking at the ones that we weren't pleased with. They had only 3.
And they might actually only have 2, but yeah, no, I think we can start with 4. And the thing with these, the benefit we have of this is when we do start getting projects coming in, we're going to see what people are proposing. And if we need to make additional tweaks, whether more restrictive or less restrictive, we can do that. See, we're doing this right now with really, we don't have much in the way of coming through the front door. We're just trying to prepare that door that we can say, hey, you know, this is open for you, but we don't necessarily have anyone beating it down yet saying, oh, I want to do this and this is what I want to do. So in a way that benefits us, but it also kind of leaves us with some blind spots because we don't know what people are wanting yet. So, but it happens all over. So it's not anything that we're not used to.
On
And I think-
4.5, I'm assuming that this only applies to the first story. Is that right? About
On number
the open
5, where it
window?
talks about adjacent to the street.
No, the part that talks about the open window space and, you know.
Yeah, that's really what that's referring to is the streetscape.
So that won't restrict the residential above.
No.
So my question is, Adam, is where we say a maximum setback of 10 feet. If someone wants to, you know, say they want to plan like a restaurant on the along the sidewalk, and they want to have additional space to use that, if they exceed that 10 feet, so they can actually have some outside dining, is that going to be a problem?
Do you
'Cause I
think
don't
we
mean
should,
that-
do you think we
how-
should expand that to like 15 feet instead of 10?
Or give them a range?
Yeah, we could do a range. Maybe like with a maximum setback line of 5 to 15. Would that work?
Have you seen Main Street areas that have kind of like different levels of setback on that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
have?
definitely. I think
Okay.
one area that I've really noticed is Park City. There's buildings there that are all, I mean, they're kind of all over. It's not a solid setback line. It's some are
Okay, great.
recessed a little more, some are pushed out a little more.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that too, Jeff.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. And again, going back to Chicago as an example, I mean, there's definitely areas where the restaurants have kind of bled out into the sidewalk areas and have been allowed. It's actually, I like it personally. I think it's
Yeah,
nice.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
One thing I'm wondering about is like over in Pleasant Grove where that grilled cheese place is on Center Street, just south of Main. It's a north facing restaurant. And in the wintertime, they have a real mess out there with people trying to eat out there and keeping the snow off the sidewalk because it's a north facing restaurant. And they use the sidewalk quite effectively, but it is real hassle in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And you know, the half of our Main Street faces north.
So Adam, what did you put there? A maximum setback of 10 to 15 or what?
No, what I did is, so in my notes for revision, I put, I'm gonna put a range of 5 to 15.
5 seems small. I think if you want walkability, it seems like you'd want maybe 10 to 15.
And we can do that.
You know, another way of handling it would be to just have a provision in there where the planning commission is allowed to make adjustments with, you know, certain findings or so.
Mhm.
And just stick with the 10 or so and then sort of handle it on a case by case basis.
I kind of like saying 10 to 15 so that people know just looking at it, like, okay, this will work. And then we could still make it so that we can adjust it.
Well, and luckily even with 10 to 15, that's not going to be enough for like a parking space. And so it's still, but it does give you a variety of storefronts, if you will, or building fronts.
Okay, anything else, people?
Can we talk about the part that talked about the signage? Where was that? Number
14, I think, up above.
Oh, so it talks about signs and it refers to the city sign code. And then we do allow certain types of signs downtown. So I looked at that. We don't even allow any kind of big or garish signs as it is. They're restricted to basically the frontage of the building. You can have a projecting sign. You can have an A-frame sign, which we allowed a couple of years ago to give more visibility downtown. And we don't allow the pole signs downtown. So they're really just restricted to what you can put on the building, what can project from the building. And it's a function of basically the building face. And so I don't know that, I didn't feel the need to really tweak that much because of what's there currently.
So they can do, what is it called? A blade sign? They can do that?
Yeah, we call it I just call them the A-frame sign. We worked a number of years ago with the Chamber of Commerce to allow those. And so we have a specific sidewalk zone, if you will, where those can be placed. And for the most part, they've worked.
What about the kind where as you're walking down the sidewalk, it's sticking out from above, you know, so you see it hanging
Yep,
this way?
we allow those too.
What is that called?
Blade sign.
What was
Thinking
that,
like
Mendeley?
banners type thing.
They call it blade sign. or
Blade sign,
projecting
yeah.
sign.
Yeah, projecting, yeah.
Okay.
But we don't allow, right now, we don't allow electronic display signs downtown. I didn't see a need to change that. We have had people approach us in the past and say they want an electronic sign downtown, and we've said they're not allowed downtown. This is where they are allowed. And we've never had, so far, we haven't had severe pushback on that.
All right, Adam, do you think you've got enough input from the commission to push this thing forward?
I
guess
do.
I have another question.
Mhm.
Do we have language in the, maybe in this area to just keep it kind of family friendly to avoid adult bookstores or things like that?
Yeah, those are handled in other ordinances, so there are uses that are not allowed here. I know what you're thinking of, and after that particular use went in, the city went ahead and overhauled. Now I can't even think of the proper term for it, but we did. Those types of uses are basically only allowed in industrial zones and maybe planned industrial, or maybe it's just in industrial.
Okay.
But we did
I
look at
remember
that.
Yeah. Another thought, will the sidewalks be pressed? What do you call it? Pressed concrete or something like that? Or will they just be flat? I'm thinking of
You mean
strollers.
Stamped concrete.
So in
I'm
one of
thinking
the
of,
downtown,
like
in
making
one
it
of,
easy for strollers.
so I think they'd just be standard sidewalks, but in one of the Main Street Vision documents, it does call for certain treatments along the sidewalk for Main Street. But again, that's
But
right of
usually
way
that's at
that's
the corners, isn't
with
it?
its UDOT, and it is really limited to corners. But again, that's UDOT controlled right of way. Everywhere else would just be a standard city sidewalk. I mean, someone could propose something else like a stamped concrete, and I don't see that we would say no. But I
No,
I
I like-
also.
I like
so,
standard better.
Yeah.
Me too.
So my question, if you think of anything else, please call or shoot me an email. My question is, do you want to have another draft as a discussion, or should I do the draft and we schedule a public hearing? And if we need to continue it, we can always continue the public hearing. What are your thoughts on that?
I say let's move forward with the draft.
And schedule a public hearing or doing one more discussion?
No, I think we've discussed it pretty good, and if they got more, they can give it to you on an email or whatever. Let's
Okay.
move it forward and get going with the ordinance and a public hearing.
So what we can do is schedule this for a public hearing, and then again, if we will make these changes, send it out to you. And then if you think that at the public hearing, if you feel that there are more changes or you're not comfortable moving it on to council, then what you can do is basically table action on it, and then we just continue on from there. But I think that's a good idea, John. I'm supportive of that.
Okay, that's what I think we ought to do. Let's not overthink this. Let's move it forward and get the public involved and make it happen.
I have a question. What about number 15 with the check cashing? Why does that have to be like called out specifically? And is that something that we want?
So we have a separate ordinance for that basically limits those to a mile apart from each other, and it's based on the city's population. So that's why that's in there. And so if a check cashing place wanted to go in, they'd have to demonstrate that A, they're a mile apart from another similar facility, and that we're not already overbuilt, which I think we already are in the city. So it's kind of a limiting thing. But that's a use, if you feel shouldn't be downtown, we can take that out because they are allowed in all of the other commercial zones.
Yeah, I don't think that needs to be downtown. It doesn't seem, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like
I'm okay with it, honestly, to just keep it as is.
Yeah, let's leave it as is. I agree.
Okay.
okay.
I did have someone call me the other day about one, and I had to tell them that the city is at its limit. And so unless one of them goes out, we really can't accept anymore.
All right. Let's
Because
move on.
I mean, it may not be a favorable business to some, but it is being used by others. So I don't want to make things so prescriptive.
Okay.
We got to strike that balance.
Okay.
Well, we seem
Well,
to have
we-
the balance
we can
already
leave it in
struck in
for
the
now.
city.
There was a part that I was wondering if it was ambiguous. I think it was up toward the very top where it said multifamily residential dwellings when located above or adjacent to a permitted commercial.
Oh, I think what we could do there, what I was trying to get at was those could be interior, if you will. I could work on that and fix that a little bit.
Yeah. It seemed like,
All right, let's move on. I think we've hammered this pretty good. Adam's got some good ideas, and we get a draft back, we go through it again, and we
Yep.
can rehash the fine tuning part of it. We have to.
And like I said earlier, as development comes in, if we need to change things one way or the other, we can always do that. We've done it many times with other codes, and we'll probably do it again with this one, but at least this opens that door. It gives us something to work with, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, we
So,
have the
I'll
flexibility
get that
to change
done.
things as needed.
sorry, I just had one more question. As far as the things we've been talking about that we feel differently about specifically on Main Street, like which uses would fit better there and which wouldn't. And then, pedestrian lighting, I don't feel like I need to require that all across the CC1, but on Main Street and, maybe the directly adjacent streets or areas, do we need any further kind of clarification of specifically Main Street, or, I mean,
So
is that
anything
something that's just
again,
limited by parking?
anything on Main Street is obviously within the UDOT right of way, but in the one of the Main Street vision plans, it does call out specific lighting for Main Street.
Okay, so then
and
about the
so-
other uses that we felt,
The other uses,
just the other uses that we've been talking about that we felt would be okay in some of the CC1, but not specifically on Main Street.
And if you have ideas on that, shoot them over to me. We can definitely do that. And I've got some notes on some of those that we have discussed, so you'll see that change.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to other business. Anybody got any other business we need to discuss?
Good job, Adam.
Rod, go ahead.
I was just saying, good job, Adam. This is well done.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thanks.
He's worth his weight in gold, that's for sure, Rod. You've got that exactly right. All right, anybody with any other business? One last call.
There was something that I was gonna bring up that was brought up last meeting, and we thought maybe we should make a change on that. And I wrote it down. What was it? It's about, I guess I'll have to bring it up next.
You must be getting close to 30, starting to forget things.
40.
You said it, I didn't. All right, site plan committee report. Anything to report there, Vendley?
Yes. Let me put up the upcoming agenda.
And we'll add add this ordinance to that.
Yeah, so this is the upcoming draft agenda. We'll be adding the CC1 ordinance to that. So as you can see, there are plats in the TOD zone in there, the second and the third item. Then an additional plat in the Tim Polo subdivision that's north of the temple. And otherwise it's the item that got tabled, but that got withdrawn on this agenda is back on the Catalyst subdivision.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Moving on, review and action on the minutes of the August 19th, 2020 Planning Commission regular session. Do I have a motion on that one, please, from someone?
I move that we approve the minutes of the August 19th Planning Commission regular session.
All right, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Chris.
Chris is second. All right. Any further discussion on the minutes? Now, I turned in a few corrections too, so. Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Christine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Rod?
Aye.
Harold?
I think he dropped out.
All right. Jeff?
Abstain.
Ryan?
Like he dropped off too.
Do we have enough yes votes?
And Sherman votes yes, so we have four yays and one abstention. The motion
Okay,
passed.
then I think we're good.
We're good. All right, we needed a motion for adjournment from someone, please.
Move to adjourn, Jeff.
Have a motion from Jeff. To have a second?
Second.
Chris.
All right, have a second from Christine. We are adjourned. Thank you much, folks.
All right,
I
thanks everyone.
remembered what my other thing was, and it was something we already talked about with the minimum product requirements. And I was going to ask about, and I could talk about this later at, on the record, but I was going to ask about if we wanted to change that requirement for the city wide, to
Oh,
be
okay.
4 instead of just 3.
And we may very well.
Anyway,
All right.
All right, see you guys.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
much, folks. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
bye.
Good night.